Guys, welcome again. Today we'll be having Syed Farhan Ahmed. He is an MSP, beta level MSP from India. He is founder of Tesseract Coding and also founder of Q Power Community. Q Power means Quantum Power Community. So that's Q Power for abbreviated. Okay, so Farhan Bhai today would be talking on introduction to quantum computing. And yes, we'll also be having some hands-on experience with Q Sharp based on IBM Watson as well. So if you guys do not have an IBM Watson account, I would suggest that meanwhile this is all being done, you should create your IBM Watson account. Yeah, so over to you, Farhan Bhai.
Thanks a lot for introducing me, Mursal. So, as Mursal already said, I'm a Microsoft student partner from India and also founder of Tesseract Coding. And today's session is all about quantum computing. We'll start from basics of how quantum computers look like, and we'll move towards the computing paradigm of quantum. So before I begin this session, I would like to ask you guys a question. So why are we even having this session? We could have a session on machine learning or web development or computer architecture or any other trending topics which are in great demand in this market. So why are we having this particular talk? So for those who are beginners into quantum computing, I'll give a few pointers. So computing power is limited these days. We need more and more of it. We are realizing that the processes that we are running on computers, on supercomputers, are not getting completed on time, are not getting completed due to lack of memory, due to lack of processing power. And of course, hardware is not coping up. We all are aware of Moore's law and how it is coming to an end. We know that the size of transistor is getting smaller and smaller, but there is a limit to it. There is a limit to which you can fit the number of transistors in an IC. So that's one of the reasons to delve into new paradigm of computing, that is quantum computing. Next thing is classical cryptography algorithms are outdated these days, and they can be cracked very easily in certain cases. We need to look into more complicated cryptographic algorithms that aren't classical in nature. That's where quantum cryptography comes into picture. Okay, and next, thanks to this year again, 2020, we have realized how unprepared we are, how our drug discovery processes are very slow. We know that there are diseases coming out every day, but our technology is not able to cope up with it. The, when you are discovering a new drug or a new medicine for a disease, you need to go through millions or billions of molecular simulations, and these simulations involve a lot of quantum nature of molecules, and it requires a huge amount of processing power, and classical computers these days do not cope up with this. Hence we move on to quantum computing. And finally, whenever we see tech giants like Google or Microsoft or Honeywell or IBM spending millions or billions of dollars on one single technology, we need to understand that this technology belongs to the future, and it's high time that we start learning and talking about it. A simple example, okay, this is the quantum computer from Honeywell. 2 days ago, this was in the news, wherein Honeywell claims that they have created the most stable 64 volume quantum computer. That's a huge feat, given that IBM has created a 32 volume quantum computer. We'll talk about quantum volume later in this talk. So finally, quantum computing is a new paradigm of computing that will entirely change the world. These are things that we will be talking about. So I'll touch upon what computing actually is, what a classical computer is made of, how things communicate inside a classical computer. Then I'll contrast this with how quantum computers are made, and I'll touch upon a little bit of quantum hardware. Then I'll move on to quantum computing, applications of quantum computing, then about qubits, representation of qubits, qubit as vector states, state vectors, and I'll also talk about quantum gates as matrix operations on these qubits. We'll talk about qubits, and I'll be covering basically 3 gates: Hadamard, Poly-X, and CNOT gates. Don't worry if you don't understand what they are. We'll talk about that in great detail. There are more quantum gates available than these 3, but if you understand the basics of these 3 quantum gates, you can easily understand the rest as well. Okay, next we move on to Microsoft Q Sharp, the language for quantum computing by Microsoft. If we have time, we'll also touch upon, or we'll also have hands-on sessions with the IBM Circuit Composer, Quantum Circuit Composer. Then we'll talk about quantum entanglement, how things can get entangled, how qubits can get entangled, and we'll have a hands-on session with Microsoft Q Sharp, wherein you entangle 2 different qubits together. And if time permits later on, we'll talk about a few extra things like the multiverse interpretation of quantum computing, the Deuce problem. We'll discuss how Deuce had defined the problem, how he solved it with quantum computing. Then we'll talk about a little bit about Grover's search. So that's for the contents of this talk. Let's move on. So let me ask you this question: what is computing? Let me get my pointer here. Okay, fine. So if I give you these 2 numbers, 4 plus 3, to add them, what would be the result? You would tell me that it's 7. But think of the complications that are actually happening in your brain. Think of the number of neurons that are getting fired. Think of the number of connections between those neurons. So the first question that comes into picture is computing a physical process? In your case, in our case, 4 plus 3 equals 7. Yes, it is a physical process wherein physical neurons are involved, the physical connections are involved. And is it finite in time? Yes, you took some amount of time to give me the answer, which is 4 plus 3 equals 7. So yes, it is finite in time. Time did not stop for you while computing this thing. And what about the number of states? Is it fixed or infinite? So you can think of number of states as number of neurons used, or you can think of the states as the number of connections between those neurons being used, and etc. So the final outcome is that the number of states is fixed. So let's reiterate, what is computing? Computing is a physical process, finite in time, with a fixed number of states. All right, on the right side you see an abacus, and that also is a physical process. I'm sure everyone has used an abacus. So now, what is a building block of a classical computer? Everyone has heard of transistors and how they work. They act just like switches, and millions or billions of these transistors in modern ICs. For example, Intel's Core i7, i9 processors, billions of ICs combined together, they can work wonders. So what is this transistor made up of? It's made up of a CMOS. It is basically a CMOS device made up of semiconductors. In this case, either silicon or germanium. And what is the temperature of operation? It operates at room temperature. And due to operation, if the temperature increases inside the IC is able to sustain that temperature. And it is obviously greater than room temperature, which is nothing but 300 okay, wait a minute. Let me just convert 0 degrees Celsius to Kelvin, which becomes 273 Kelvin. This is not room temperature, but I'm just saying that this is obviously greater than 0 degrees Celsius, the operation of a transistor, normal transistor. Let's touch upon the basic computing device, in this case, a NOT gate. This is an IC 7404, and it contains an inverter circuit. It uses the transistor given here, various transistors in combination, and it creates a NOT gate. So what does a NOT gate do? Everyone knows this, but I'll just brief it for you. If you pass in a high voltage to this NOT gate, to any of the pins of this IC, okay, there are pin numberings. I'm not going to go into the pin numberings, but if you give a high signal, you will get a low signal as the output. And if you give a low signal, you will get a high signal as an output. It's a simple inverting device. So I would consider this as a basic computing device. And once you combine all these computing devices together, billions of these together, you can form an awesome a classical computer. So let's understand how a classical computer actually works internally. So we have the arithmetic logic unit. So let's take an example of 4 plus 3 again. So if we have the number 4, so we have memory separately and we have CPU separately. So if we have 4 and 3, 4 will be stored in some location of the memory, 3 will be stored in some other location of the memory. They are not stored inside the arithmetic logic unit. They're stored in memory, taken to the ALU. Data from the memory is given to the arithmetic logic unit. It is being processed here. and the result, which is 7, which is given back to the memory and being stored in any of the locations, which is given by this address for reading or writing, in this case writing. So let's say the address for 7 is location 6. You store 7 in this case. So how is all of this happening? It is happening because of voltage levels, either voltage high level or voltage low level. So high level is nothing but bit 0, low level is nothing but, sorry, high level is nothing but bit 1, and low level is nothing but bit 0. So if we were talking about 4, if you convert 4 to binary numbers, it would be 1, 0, 0. Please apologize my handwriting. I'm using a mouse to write on the screen. And for 3, it becomes 0, 1, 1. And if you add them both together, you get 1, 1, 1, which is nothing but decimal value for 7. This is how a classical computer works. Let's talk about, okay, before that, classical bits, a little more properties about that. So information is processed as a sequence of bits. As you saw in this case, we had sequences 1, 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, or 1, 1, 1. They are in a sequence, linear sequence. These are converted to decimal values, and that is presented as a result. And yeah, physical systems can be implemented into two possible states. So as discussed, 1 and 0. Before I move on to quantum computing and quantum computers, I'll touch upon two concepts of mathematics: vectors and vector spaces. So we all know, we have studied in basic physics, a vector is nothing but something that has both magnitude and a direction. So a generic definition is mentioned here: mathematical objects with both magnitude and direction. So now what is a vector space, you might ask? So vector space is nothing but collection of all these vectors in certain manner, in a certain dimension, wherein these two conditions are met. So these two operations are two vectors. If you add them, the operation has to be closed. And if you're multiplying a vector with a scalar, again, the operation has to be closed. I'm not going into the complexities of this. I'm just giving you a basic overview of what vector spaces are. And finally, we'll talk about qubits. Just know that qubits are also known as state vectors. They're represented as state vectors in quantum computing. So what are qubits? So these are core components of quantum computing. Just like we had bits in classical computing, ones or zeros, we have qubits in quantum computing. And an exponential amount of information can be encoded. I'll talk about this in the next slide. And superposition of these states is possible. So what is superposition, you might ask? Any qubit can be a superposition of two different states, 0 or 1, and they can be superposed with, and this state of superposition is probabilistic, which means that once you're measuring a state, it can either be 1 or it can be either 0, and that entire thing has a probability. Let me give you are you able to see this OneNote screen, Mursal?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, all right. So consider a circle of 1 unit. So the radius is, let me draw it here. Let's say the radius is 1 unit. I'm again saying apologize my handwriting, I'm using a mouse to write. And the positive x-axis radius of this circle can be considered as the 0 qubit, and the positive y-axis can be considered as the 1 qubit. And if you take any other vector or any other radius in between, which makes an angle with the x-axis, some angle phi or some angle theta, then you can represent this particular vector, which is the psi vector, equals alpha 0 vector plus beta 1 vector. So in a vector space, you might think for any values of alpha and beta, if you combine this together, you can form a qubit. But this is not true. A qubit can also only be formed when this condition holds, wherein mod alpha square, which is probability of getting a 0 vector once a qubit is measured, plus beta square mod of beta square equals 1. This condition has to be satisfied for alpha and beta in this equation, vector equation. Only then you can call this vector equation as a qubit. And now we are representing vectors 0 vector and 1 vector as a vector, as 1 0 and 0 1. We'll talk about this. Okay. Now let me talk about the exponential amount of information that can be encoded. So assume that you have n number of qubits. So n is equal to 1. How much information can you store in it? Or how can you represent this vector in a vector state? It turns out you can represent it with 2 to the power n states. So 2 to the power 1 in this case is equal to 2. And now if n is equal to 2, which means this is 4, 2 to the power 2 is 4. If n is 10, this becomes 2 to the power 10, which is nothing but 1024. So just think of it, if you have 10 qubits, you can encode 1024 states, and your dimension of the vector space becomes 1024. Just think that you are living in a 3-dimensional structure. You are living in a 3-dimensional world right now. If you consider time as another dimension, it's 4 dimensions. But you can encode this as 1024 dimensions using a quantum computer. Now, just to contrast, think of a 1000 qubit system. You have 1000 qubits. This would be 2 to the power 1000. But we know that 2 to the power 1000 can be written as 2 to the power 10 into 100. So 2 to the power 10 is nothing but 1024. 1024 raised to the power 100, which nothing but gives us almost 10 to the power 300. So if you have 1000 qubits, you can have 10 to the power 300 number of digits. That is the dimensionality of your vector space. So think of the power of a quantum computer, what wonders it can do. All right, let's talk about basis. So I explained what a vector is. I gave you a brief overview and intuition of vector spaces, but you need to understand what a basis is as well. So assume this is your vector. This a blue thing which you see here is your vector, and it is represented using these 3 purple vectors. This same vector can be represented using 3 base vectors in the red color as well. So everyone knows about vector addition, right? If you have 2 different vectors, A and B, then the addition of these 2 vectors would be something like this. Okay. The image is not drawn to scale, it is just to give you a brief overview. And similarly, instead of vectors A and B, in this case A, B and C, these are your bases for this huge vector V. Consider this as vector V. And now you can change the basis again using these 3 red vectors. Let's say D, E, F. So what you're doing is you're changing the base of the vector using these 3 different vectors. So what is a basis basically? The combination of these 3 vectors which you see A, B and C is known as the basis. And similarly, this vector can have another basis which is D, E and F. Alright. Let's move on to quantum computer. You know what qubits are now. So the basic building block of quantum computer is qubits, and we use quantum algorithms for messing up with these qubits, for doing calculations. We will discuss a few algorithms later on in this talk. And another important thing is information is processed and stored in the quantum states of matter. So you might be asking, what are these quantum states? So in this diagram, you have seen that you had 2 to the power n dimensional vector space. In some sense, you could consider them as quantum states of matter. And if you think of storing data in that huge dimensional structure, things become really interesting. If we have more time at the end of the talk, I'll discuss about this. it has something to do with the multiverse interpretation of quantum computing. All right. So we know that the basic building block of classical computer is nothing but a simple transistor. So there has to be something equivalent, right? So we call it a quantum transistor, and it is also known as SQUID. If you try and expand SQUID, it comes out to be superconducting quantum interference device. We'll talk about interference in the next slide. So let's focus on superconducting and quantum. What is superconducting temperature? So if you have a metal and if you try to cool it to a very low temperature, the resistance in the metal becomes almost zero. It comes to zero, which means that if you pass some electric current into the metal, it will keep flowing for infinity without stopping. There's no electron bombardment. And of course, what is the meaning of quantum? Which means these materials will follow quantum mechanics and behave as quantum particles. So this is from D-Wave Systems. This is an old system, 2012 D-Wave system. And what they're using as a quantum transistor is niobium. So they're instead of silicon that we had in a transistor, they're using niobium at a very, very low temperature, less than 0.1 Kelvin. So to contrast, I told that 0 degrees Celsius, wherein ice freezes, is 273 Kelvin. Think about this temperature, 0.1 Kelvin. Outer space itself is 2.5 Kelvin. So it's an awesome thing that the cryogenic labs that are present in various companies, IBM or Honeywell or Microsoft or Google, they are having a temperature much, much lower than deep space. And of course, this niobium structures which you have, which behave as quantum transistors, have magnetic fields. And how do you have these qubit states as 0 and 1? So if you have a magnetic field of +1, which is nothing but qubit 1, if you have a magnetic field of -1, it is qubit -1. And then they can be in superposition with both +1 and -1 at different magnitudes. You can control the knob using a quantum system. All right. This is the most important part here, the physics behind dual nature of matter. If you had a normal gun and if you shot out bullets, you had two different slits available, slit 1 and slit 2. And then you have a movable detector which detects the bullets on this backstop. Then you will come to a conclusion that if you're closing slit 2 and you're leaving slit 1 open, P1 is the probability distribution which you will get for the bullets. So the bullets will fall somewhere here with maximum probability, and the probability will reduce as you move away from this particular region. Similarly, if you close slit 1, open slit 2, you get P2 as the probability distribution. And if you open both of them together with probability mathematics, you can add these two probabilities, and this is how your probability distribution will look like. This is for normal particle, which is a gun. Now, instead of particle, if you had a photon, and you're firing the photons in a similar manner, you will notice that it does not follow this particular pattern. You can see something different. You can see an interference pattern. So what is actually happening? This photon as a matter is behaving as waves, and these waves interfere, and you see dark bands. You see bands of great intensity, and the intensity reduces as you move further away from the center. Similarly on the other side, and the empty centers which you see here are nothing but dark areas. There is no light present at this area, which means that none of the photons have hit this area. This clearly violates our probability distribution, which means that there has to be some amount of photons, or in this case bullets, if bullets were fired in this manner. But we are getting an interference pattern, which clearly shows the dual nature of matter. Matter behaves as both waves and as objects, and they have a wave function associated with it. Due to lack of time, I will not speak about wave functions. It will complicate our talk, and yes, that's one. So yeah, in normal processors, in classical processors, we have wires connecting different transistors. So if you have different logic gates present inside your IC, you have wires made of copper or aluminum, which connect these entities together to make up a processor. But this cannot happen in a quantum fabric. So what happens if you have a normal copper or aluminum connections between them? This will nothing but increase the electron bombardment, which will in turn lose the quantum state. So once a quantum state has been given to a particular qubit, if you try to send it through a channel made up of copper or aluminum or any other non-superconducting material, which means that it will lose its states, in turn you will lose the data. So what we have instead is use of couplers, and they are analogous to wires, of course. And in multi-qubit systems, these couplers are also superconducting, and together they form the quantum fabric, forming a multi-qubit processor. This was just a brief overview of quantum hardware. Let me talk about a few applications of quantum computers before I move on to quantum gates and the math and the hands-on sessions. So the best example would be support vector machines, SVM. The people can resonate well because many of them know machine learning here, I suppose. So now if you have, say, two different classes of objects, let's say red color dots, or let's say apples, red apples, and then we have green apples. They don't look like apples, but they are apples. And now, if I tell you separate these two classes, if you were to separate these two classes, you have to draw a line between them. A line in this case is known as a hyperplane. So if you try and draw a line, you can see it's pretty easy to draw a line, right? Just draw a line and it separates the red and green apples. It's simple. But how many lines can you draw? You can draw this line. You can draw infinite number of lines in between these two. So which is the most optimal hyperplane or the most optimal line that you can draw? So to calculate this, we take the nearest green apple and the nearest red apple to the line that we have drawn. Assume we have drawn this line, and we take the distance, perpendicular distance. This becomes your support vector. So hence the name comes support vector machines. And based on these support vectors, this line will be adjusted to form the most optimal hyperplane. Now think of a situation wherein you have a similar kind of classification problem, wherein you have apples placed somewhere here, red apples, and you have green apples placed somewhere in between. So now how would you separate them? You can even draw a single line. In this case, a single line in any way will not separate them. You need to draw a circle, you need to draw some kind of an ellipse to separate them. So think of this. The line equation is nothing but y is equal to mx plus c. And the line is one-dimensional. But here circle is two-dimensional. And the equation becomes a little bit complicated. What if you had a cubic equation? What if you had an equation with degrees, n to the power, say, x, and x can be, say, 10, 20, 30. When things become more complicated, you need to branch off from these two dimensionals and try to convert this problem in a multi-dimensional environment. So we have already discussed, if you have qubits, you can have 2 to the power n multi-dimensional vector space, and these problems can be easily solved using quantum computers. Here's a small GIF to explain this. So you can see that you have red color dots and blue color dots. To separate them, you move to a higher dimension. The plane here which you see is two-dimensional, but we are moving to 3 dimensions. And we are trying to add a hyperplane to separate them. This hyperplane is nothing but two-dimensional again. And the equation for it is much simple. I mean, it's much simpler than, a cubic equation or an equation to n to the power 4 or n to the power 5. And quantum computers can solve this particular problem very easily. Another advantage, quantum parallelism. Of course, they have lot of parallelism capabilities. If your computer, classical computer, is solving something line by line or linearly, quantum computers can solve them parallelly. You might argue that GPUs do the task parallelly, but what is the GPU actually made of? It's made of classical components which do stuff linearly, and you're making it do stuff parallelly, and which involves a lot of computing power and a lot of space as well. Okay, so here's a small example for quantum parallelism. If you have a maze with a starting point and an end point, let's say you have a maze, you have a starting point, you have an end point, and maze has multiple paths to coming to a finish line, and these paths deviate and go somewhere else, and there's only one particular solution. So what a normal computer would do, normal classical computer, it would iterate through all the possible paths. If there are 5 paths, it will iterate through all of them one by one. And then if it doesn't find the path, move on to the next one. Doesn't find, move on to the next one. But in quantum parallelism, what actually happens is you have a maze, you can see at the edge, it's splitting in 2 parts at the same time. There is parallelism involved. Okay, this image was actually made using a GPU, wherein you're actually retracing the path to see where the start and end meet. But in a quantum computer, you won't have to do even that. It is very much simple. You just give it the start and end point. There are multiple paths available. It will choose all the paths at a single time, and if it finds the destination, it will stop the process and you found the solution. As simple as that. More applications of quantum computers. They have more applications than quantum machine learning. Not only support vector machines, but more applications wherein the multidimensional property can be utilized. And of course, quantum cryptography. This is a highly evolving field. It also has a lot of applications in business modeling, wherein you can model the financial situations in much faster, in a much better way. There are applications in weather forecasting. Of course, in particle physics, if you're using simulators, classical simulators for particle physics, you won't be able to solve a lot of problems. You will run into issues. And provided that these small particles that we are talking about have a quantum nature, it is best that we solve it using a quantum computer, which itself works on principles of quantum mechanics. And of course, it has a lot of applications in healthcare. I've discussed that earlier, molecular simulations and various other applications. Let's move on to quantum gates. All right. So quantum gates, you might think, what are these gates? These are nothing but matrix operations. Everyone is aware of matrices. They have dimensions, like for example n cross m, where number of rows cross number of columns, or in some cases number of columns cross number of rows if you're taking a transpose. So now these are nothing but operations which are applied.
Danger Will Robinson. Danger Will Robinson.
What happened, sir? What happened?
मोरसल
I
again sir disconnect हो गए.
Yeah, I think he forgot the topic and now he left.
Did Farhan leave the meeting, or like, yeah, he might have been disconnected? He intimated before that due to electricity issues, he might be disconnected from the meeting for a while. So I think we should wait for a minute for him to come back. Well, guys, we're so sorry for the inconvenience, but this electricity issue is now a global issue, I suppose. So just give me a minute. Okay, guys. Meanwhile, you all should make your IBM Watson accounts so that when Farhan is back, we can follow up with the hands-on practice. If someone already has a IBM Watson account, then he or she should take rest. Else, I would prefer you make your IBM Watson account. Okay, done. Yeah, very great. Details, please. Okay, who is this? Okay, IBM Watson. Okay, let me share the link for IBM Watson here, the chat box. IBM Watson is basically a platform where we'd be practicing with Q Sharp. Q Sharp is a language for quantum computing. I'm sharing the link here. You can just visit this website and create your account until Farhan is back. Oh, I didn't notice, Ricardo, you're also here. Hello, Ricardo, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm fine. It's a great meeting
Yeah.
so far.
It's for the first time I'm hearing your voice, although we've been in, like, we've worked so much together.
Yeah. I'm very excited for the rest of his talk. It's really
Yeah,
good.
but you know, electricity has issues in our region. Be it Pakistan, be it India, be it Bangladesh, we have electricity issues a lot. Even I got disconnected 3 times during the meeting.
Yeah. It's happening a lot now. I don't know why.
I think so. It must be because of all this pandemic thing and lockdown all over the world. We're consuming way lot electricity than usual time.
No, yeah. I think it was 2 weeks ago. I was going to give a webinar, and my connection dropped right after I began. It took me like 25 minutes to come back.
Okay, I think somebody is removing. Yeah, please don't do this thing here. Do we have Damini here? Damini, can you please make everyone as an attendee?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you so much, Damini. Okay, well, Ricardo, let me tell you, like, this event is in collaboration with 2 other societies. Tesseract Coding, or Tesseract Coding that we are a part of, and the other one is IEEE Computer Society that like we are part of. Did someone also remove Ricardo?
That's awesome.
Ricardo, you are. Just
So yeah,
let me connect
it's
Farhan.
yeah,
He's taking
it's good
long.
to see that so much people are interested in quantum computing, and if you have a good knowledge of programming, I have an invitation because the Microsoft Q Sharp GitHub repository is accepting collaborations for contributors. We have a lot of things to improve in the language, and we've been working on it to try to make it a more efficient language. Also, Syed and I are working on a repository for for the Q Sharp language, and we will make it available for everyone with codes for implementation for data structures and algorithms in the Q Sharp language, so that people that are familiar with other languages can have a platform to compare and to learn the language easier.
Oh, wow, that's great. But sadly, I don't have the know-how for Q Sharp. Yeah, but I love to know about Q Sharp, because see, the main problem with people like us, like people for us, is we don't know where to start from. We don't know where to begin with, and that is the biggest hindrance that we face. So yeah, this platform, this today's talk with Farhan, or you like say that Farhan is back.
Hello.
Okay, Farhan. Yeah, Farhan, you are back.
Hey.
Thank God.
Yeah, what time
Yeah.
did I leave? I think someone had removed me from the meeting.
Huh?
Yeah, it said someone removed you from the meeting. I'm giving the talk here and I realized that. Okay.
It was
Oh
me.
my
So
God.
I was correcting everything you said.
I
Okay.
told you someone is removing.
Just kidding.
Okay, so from next meeting, I'll have to like impose class strictness, class
Okay.
level strictness.
I guess so.
Okay, so like Farhan, you should. I think you should. Damini, did you make Farhan an attendee as well? Can you please make him backup presenter? Like if he would be an attendee, then who would present? Okay, Farhan, you are.
What time was I removed? Can you tell me till what did you guys see?
Okay, I think the audience should answer
Yeah.
this. Action plan.
Yeah, I guess.
When class start again, Abid Ligari, anybody know about tribal? Okay, classes start.
Is it part of the class discussion or we start the?
Can you repeat, please?
I say that discussion was all the part of the class, or we have to discuss for the connection, internet connection.
I didn't get you what you're saying, Abid.
I told that discussion was the part of the class, or for the troubling of network, you have to discuss about topics.
No, no, no. The things
Okay, so
that
the
we
thing
just
is someone
discussed.
had removed me from the meeting, so they were discussing about stuff till I rejoined the meeting.
Yeah, obviously. So, like
So now,
Farhan, you can just start over again.
I want to ask from where till where did you guys see? Did you see this slide?
Quantum gates.
This slide. Okay.
Where quantum gates?
Quantum gates was completely covered. About Hadamard gate.
Last one slide.
Yeah. I think quantum gate was not completed. It was
Not
still
completed. Go
going
back.
on.
Okay, did I start Hadamard gate then in this case?
No, no,
No,
no, no.
you did
You
not.
didn't
Okay,
start.
so I was removed at that time. I was continuing. All right. So I'll start from quantum gates once again. So are you able to see the screen? Am I audible?
Yeah, Farhan,
Yes,
affirmative.
the matrix m by n by m rows into columns. You were at
Acha.
that point.
Acha. Okay. So yeah, I was talking about the quantum gates being matrix operations, and they are applied onto qubits, which are nothing but vectors. And these quantum gates have to be unitary, just because we have qubits which were defined earlier to be unitary, and the outputs which we get are unitary. If we had quantum gates which were non-unitary, then the outputs could be unitary or non-unitary, which would spoil the quantum computer. All right, so let's move on to Hadamard gate. So Hadamard gate is defined as 1 by root 2 into this matrix which you see. And I just wrote all of this. I didn't know someone had removed me. All right, so instead of writing again, I'll just explain it. So you have this Hadamard gate here and you have the zero vector here. Everyone is able to see the OneNote screen, right? Wherein I'm writing.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, Farhan, we're able to see that.
Yeah. So the zero vector is nothing but 1, 0. And if you apply the Hadamard gate on this zero vector, it would be 1 by root 2 into this matrix, the H matrix, into the vector, zero vector. And if you try and multiply this, so multiplication would give you 1 into 1 plus 1 into 0, which is 1 here. And 1 into 1 plus minus 1 into 0, which would give you 1 here. And this thing is also equivalent to this. You can split 1, 1 as 1, 0 plus 0, 1. And we know that 1, 0 is nothing but the vector representation of the 0 vector, 0 state, and 0, 1 is the vector representation of 1 state. So we have successfully, put a vector, a qubit 0 of 0 state into superposition of both states 0 and 1. We call this state as the plus vector state, a special state, and it can be represented on this circle, something similar to this. You have an angle phi, and when do you get 1 by root 2? If you were defining, if you were trying to get the x-axis part of it, it would be the vector's magnitude into cos phi, and cos phi is equal to 1 by root 2 when you have cos phi is equal to 45 degrees. So if you have this angle to be 45 degrees, the vector represented here will be the plus vector. Similarly, for h of vector 1 gives you the vector minus, and this can be written as something like this. You can try this out later on your own, which is again a superposition of vector 0 and vector 1, and this will be your minus vector state, which is minus 45 degrees. All right, so we have finally concluded that h of positive vector will again give back 0 vector, h of negative vector will give back the 1 vector. You can see this GIF here in animation. If you're passing the on state to the Hadamard gate, which is nothing but vector 1, you get back superposition of both on and off, and if you pass it again through the Hadamard gate, you get back whatever you had passed. So it's nothing but pure to mixed and back. Okay, so I would like everyone to go to quantumcomputing.ibm.com and sign up for an account if you still haven't. And you can also use Alt plus Tab to shift between the sessions of your browser and the Teams meeting which you have. I like shortcuts. All right. So
Farhan, if you can just copy paste the link in chat box.
yeah, sure. I'll just do that. This website, it looks something similar to this. I would request everyone to mute their mics. There's a lot of disturbance. Yeah, thank you. It looks something similar to this. You can either sign in with an IBM ID or sign up using GitHub. I prefer the GitHub one, which is very simple. So I just sign in here. Takes a bit of time. All right. Once everybody is into this dashboard, please let me know in the chat section, at least a few of them. Is everyone able to sign in or sign up? Okay. If anyone still needs time to sign up, please let me know in the chat section. We will discuss something else and come back to this. Till then, you can sign up. Right. So you can see that there are various backends available. The actual live quantum computers on which you can run your programs. We will start with a very simple circuit. Go to Circuit Composer, create a new circuit. I'll just name it testrat test1. Okay, let me delete the extra qubits. I just need 1 qubit here. So you can see that the qubit is initialized with a 0 state. You can reinitialize or reset the state using this operation, but we'll not be using that. This is nothing but the measuring tool, which is used to measure the state of the qubit which is in. So right now I just want to see what the state of the qubit is. So I just save the changes. I add the measurement tool and I save the changes. And finally run it with the Quantum Simulator. One shot will be more than enough for this. So what are shorts, you might ask? Think of it as the number of iterations for which your program is being run to get a better accuracy, since these models are highly probabilistic. So since we are just measuring the the state of the initialized qubit, one shot would be sufficient. This will make it really fast. Try running it with the QOSM simulator. You can see that there are pending results. It takes a few seconds to come here. Okay, so the time, yeah, it's here. The result is here. As you can see, the result is 100% at 0 state. We are concerned only about the LSB over here, the first qubit. We are not concerned about the other 4 qubits, so don't worry about them. Now, let us try and apply a Hadamard gate to this. We all know that if you pass a 0 qubit through the Hadamard gate, you get the plus vector state. And plus vector state is nothing but superposition of 0 and 1, equal superpositions. Now, you try and run this model. First save it, then try and run this model. Try it with one single shot. You will not get the desired output. I'll tell you why. Just try and run it first. While you're at it, you can run it again with 1024 shots. Okay. Yeah, the result for one shot is out. So we are expecting a superposition state of both 0 and 1. But what you see is 100% probability of state 1. Why is this happening? Once we measure the state, it has to be either 0 or 1. It cannot be a superposition of both the states. So if we run it for 1024 times, okay, it's taking some time. Yeah, it's ready with 1024 shots. You can see that you get a probability 49.7% of state 0 and 50.2% state 1, almost equal to 50%. It's almost equal to 50% of it. It's basically in a superposition state, and once you measure it, 49% of the time you get 0, 50% of the time you get 1. If you try and increase the number of shots, you will see that the probabilities will try and converge to 50, 50, 50. But they will not exactly converge. The decimal places will become more accurate. Okay. Was everyone able to open the IBM Q Experience Circuit Composer and run the Hadamard gate? Is anyone still not able to do this? Please let me know in the chat section and I'll help you out. Okay. So I'm assuming everyone is able to do this successfully. Let's move on to our next quantum gate, which is the Poly X gate. So this is nothing but similar to the NOT gate. If you pass the on state, it will give you the off state and vice versa. Let's try and mathematically prove this. So if you have the X gates on qubit 0, which is nothing but 0, 0, 1, 1. If you try and multiply this, you will get 0 into 1, 1 into 0, 0, 1 into 1 plus 0 into 0, 1. This is nothing but vector 1. So what you're doing is just using a simple Poly X gate, which is equivalent to a NOT gate, and you're inversing or inverting the state whichever is given. Similarly, if you had given a state 1, you would get the output as state 0. You can quickly go and give it a try in IBM Experience. So if you have an X gate here, so initially the state of the qubit is 0. If you add an X gate, your state should become inverted, which is 1. If you try and measure it, we save this. One shot should be more than sufficient. Okay, it's taking some time. Yeah, so we have successfully inverted a qubit from state 0 to state 1. You can see the probability being 100%. All right, let's talk about our next gate, which is the controlled NOT gate, also known as the CNOT gate. So the representation of gates can be something like this. So if you have two qubit system, A and B, it is represented as something like this. So we have represented qubits, single qubits as 0, 1, plus, minus, but we can also represent two qubits as stuff next to each other within these brackets. They are also this is also known as the Ket notation of representation. So CNOT gates look something similar to this, wherein this is your control bit and this is your controlled bit. I'll talk about this. This is how the matrix looks like. So if you were to apply a matrix on a single qubit, it would be 2 cross 2 matrix. But what you see here is actually a 4 cross 4 matrix. So you can simply infer from this that CNOT gate is applied on two qubits together. So here is the truth table, or the quantum truth table, which you may call it. If you have the input xy or AB xy as 0 0, the output is 0 0. 0 1, the output is 0 1. But if you have x is equal to 1, this is your control bit. Your controlled bit or your target bit will flip. 0 becomes 1. Again, your target control bit is 1. This will again flip from 1 to 0. This is what a controlled NOT gate does. This is the classical implementation of controlled NOT gate. Alright, if you want to give it a try in IBM Experience, let's give it a try. So we need to add one more qubit. So this is done on two different qubits. And what we are trying to achieve is this state, 1 0. So we try and invert this from 0 state to 1 state. And we save the changes. Okay, let us measure this as well. Yeah, save the changes. So we are measuring both the qubit outputs, and we run it with 1024 shots on the QOSM simulator. What we are expecting here is the output of 1 1 with the probability of 100%. Yes, and we get that. Qubit 1 1 with a probability of 100%. Right. If you want to go ahead and give it a try, you can run it on a real computer as well. So instead of the QOSM simulator, you can choose the quantum computer that you want to run it on. So I'm choosing the quantum computer in London with 1024 shots. Run it. It will take some time because okay, it's still pending. It will take some time. You can see that there are multiple people trying to access this quantum computer. So our circuit goes in a queue. It takes some time to run and get back to us when it's completed. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about two qubit systems. So a two qubit system has 4 possible deterministic states. So if you have you can have 4 different states: 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, and 1, 1. If you were to draw a state vector for this, it would look something like this. It will be a 4 cross 1 vector, wherein 4 rows, 1 column. And this state can be represented as state 0, state 1, state 2, and state 3. This is just a representation. Don't confuse this state 0 with the vector 0, vector state 0 of quantum computing. Alright, so in our 2-qubit system, we will consider the basis to be these 4 states. So now let me talk a little bit about Q-sharp before we delve more about 2-qubit systems. So Q-sharp is nothing but domain-specific quantum computing language made by Microsoft. It is in development, still in development. It is a highly developed language and still in development. And as we speak, new features are being added to it. And QDK is nothing but the quantum development kit, which allows you to run a quantum simulator right on your PC. So you might think that a quantum computer running as a simulator might not be very efficient, but if you're running it as a coprocessor, for example, assume this is your PC's processor, what QDK will do in some sense, you can think of it as a coprocessor is being defined inside, and this coprocessor simultaneously interacts with this PC. So in simple terms, you can think of this as a quantum computer, the coprocessor as a quantum computer, and all the quantum operations are being communicated from the PC to the coprocessor, being calculated here, and then sent back to the PC. Something similar to the CPU and memory architecture which we had seen in classical computers. But this is for the simulator that we're talking about. All right. So what are we going to implement using Q-sharp today? Today we are going to implement quantum entanglement. So what is this phenomenon? So Einstein called it spooky action at a distance. So if you have 2 qubits, if you entangle them, so what is entanglement? If you try and entangle them and you separate them in, say, 2 different parts of the universe, or say 2 different edges of the universe, and they will still, be connected to each other, be entangled to each other in simple terms. So think of 2 entangled qubits, and you can assume the 1 state to be blue color and the 0 state to be red color. Once they are entangled, once they are in superposition, you will not know if it is 1 or 0. But once you try to measure 1 qubit, you can see there's a light trying to measure this. And if you measure this qubit, it will lose its superposition, it will collapse its state, and the other qubit, which is entangled with the first qubit, so let's say this qubit is Q1, this qubit is Q2. So the moment Q1 loses its superposition, becomes 1, Q2 will be somehow linked to it, which will either become 0 or 1, depending on the mathematical function that we had defined earlier. All right. So here is a simple use case of quantum entanglement. Not very practical, but yeah, it is a use case. So think of the distance between Earth and Mars. It's around 130 million kilometers. And if you try and communicate, if 2 people are trying to communicate in lifetime, it's not possible. It's simply not possible. You cannot have a phone call from Earth to Mars. There will be a lot of delay, 4 to 24 minutes, depending on where the Earth and Mars are located, thanks to the elliptical orbit around the sun. So now, if you have 1 qubit, okay, let me take that color. If you have qubit 1 on Earth, and if you have qubit 2, you send it in a rocket along with an astronaut to Mars, and let's say you try and measure what qubit 1 qubit once a value is, it loses its superposition and gives you a value of either 1 or 0. Simultaneously, the qubit 2 will also lose its superposition and will give you a value which is either 1 or 0. Right now you are thinking that this is just a single qubit we are talking about, but think of multiple qubits that can form information sequences. You could use these for communication, you could use these for teleportation. There are tons of possibilities in quantum entanglement, but why hasn't anyone tried to implement these? The question is, once you try and entangle qubits, let's say q1 and q2, let's say they are entangled. Now if you try and separate q2 from q1, it has to not interact with any of the particles. The moment it interacts with even a single photon, it loses its state, which means q1 will also lose its state, which means information is lost once again. So the main difficulty right now is to separate these two qubits in a way that they don't interact with the environment. And once this is possible, there are tons of opportunities using quantum entanglement. Okay, before that, guys, we'll also be having another session on quantum machine learning and teleportation, wherein we talk about specifics of few algorithms in ML and also how quantum entanglement can be used for teleportation. So if you want to register, pre-registration is still open. Just go to bit.ly/quantum-pre-TC. TC is nothing but Tesseract coding. So if you're interested, you can go and pre-register, and the details will be sent to your email IDs later on. Enough talk, let's code now. So I would request everyone to go to this link, bit.ly/qsharprox. So if you go to this link, you will go to my GitHub page. It looks something like this. Let me put on the chat as well. So open this GitHub repo, guys.
Farhan, could you please share the link in chat section?
Yeah, I have shared it in the chat section.
Farhan?
Yes, I have shared it in the chat section.
Hello?
Hello, are you able to hear me?
Can you share the
Hello?
link? Okay, thank you so much.
Am I audible, guys?
Hello, yeah, Farhan, we're able to hear you. Yes, Farhan, you're audible.
All right, fine. So if you go to this link, you will find a binder link, launch binder. Just click on launch binder. This will take a little bit of time to load. Till then, you can have a look at what is present in entanglement.ipynb Jupyter Notebook. Till this thing loads, I will explain how quantum entanglement actually works. So guys, try and focus here because this is very important stuff. So now if you have two different qubits, let's say X and qubit Y, you're able to see the OneNote screen, guys? Is it visible? Mursal, is the OneNote screen visible? Yeah, all right, let's move on. So now if you apply...
Yeah, Farhan, it's visible. It's visible, Farhan.
All right, thank you. So if you apply a Hadamard gate to the first qubit, and then you apply a CNOT gate to the second qubit, and then finally you try to measure the qubits, you will not be able to measure them properly because these two will be in entanglement, in a state of entanglement. Let's see how this is actually happening. This is nothing but XY, two qubit system. So now if you are applying the Hadamard gate on this 2-qubit system, X, Y, so assuming that X is equal to qubit 0 initially, Y is also equal to qubit 0 initially. So then qubit 0 remains as it is over here, and this X, for example, is transformed to the plus vector state, which is nothing but 0 plus 1 vector, the whole thing divided by root 2. You can also expand this something similar to this, 0 plus 1 0 divided by root 2. Now, if you want to entangle these 2 qubits, so how is our entangle mechanism going to look like? So if you have qubit 1, Q1, if you have qubit 2, Q2, and you want to entangle them with this rule, if qubit 1 comes out to be 1, then qubit 2 should also come out as 1 state. If qubit 1 comes out as 0 state, qubit 2 should also come out as 0 state. It's a simple mirroring effect that we are trying to achieve here. So right now we don't have a mirroring effect. If the first qubit comes out to be 0, the second one comes out to be 0. This is achieved. But if the first qubit comes out to be 1, we don't achieve a 0. So what do we apply to this? We have learned a lot of gates, Hadamard, Poly X gate, and CNOT gate. The best gate that we can think of right now is the CNOT gate, which works on conditional bits. So this bit can become your this 0 can be your target bit, and 1 can be your controlled bit. If you apply a CNOT gate on top of that, you get it as 1 by root 2 times 0 0 plus 1 1. You can see that 0 has been flipped to 1 based on the control bit. Alright. So now we know how quantum entanglement works for a simple case, simple mirroring quantum entanglement effect. Let's try and code it out. So now you all must have opened this notebook. Go to entanglement.ipynb. Takes a little bit of time to load. Okay. Is everyone able to access this? Entanglement.ipynb. Right, awesome. So now you can see that the kernel is idle, and we want the backend kernel to be Q-sharp kernel. We don't want it to be a Python kernel. So we have created this Jupyter notebook in such a way that it can incorporate the Q-sharp kernel. Go to kernel, go to change kernel, and select the Q-sharp kernel. The moment you select it, you can see the Q-sharp symbol, and it says the kernel is ready. Okay, which means the Q-sharp kernel is now active. So this is the Q-sharp language, basic hello world program. So everyone is aware how to run cells, right? You can run the cell using control plus enter or shift plus enter to move to the next cell after running the first cell. Okay, so instead of having classes or functions in Q-sharp, you have something known as operations. So these are nothing but operations that you have on the qubits which you define. But in this case, we are just going to print a hello world on the console. So that is achieved using this keyword message. So run this with control enter. Takes around 10 seconds to run. A little bit of time. Yeah, if anyone is having issues in selecting Q-sharp kernel, just let me know in the chat section. I'll try to see what's the issue. So you can see that this cell has run perfectly fine. Now we will simulate this cell. Why are we simulating? Because we don't have a quantum computer. So what actually is happening is, the Jupyter notebook is running on a server or on any virtual machine in cloud, And we have defined a quantum coprocessor using the quantum development kit. So while setting up this Jupyter Notebook online, we had made sure that the QDK is ready for you to work with. So once you run this cell simulate hello world, you can see that this quantum program runs perfectly fine and it prints out hello world. All right. You can try out something else as well, message something ABC or whatever. It works fine. If it works fine for you, then well and good. Yep. If it doesn't work fine, please let me know in the chat section. We'll try to solve those issues. Next, we will have the quantum entanglement demonstration. Okay, so we are using quantum.diagnostics. So why are we using this diagnostics tool from QSharp? We will be using this function specifically known as dump machine, which shows the status of qubits in an interactive manner in the shell itself. So now we are creating an operation named entanglement demo. Okay, this is just a variable divider to separate the output which we get. Don't worry about that. We are creating a qubit, a 2-qubit system using this command. QS is equal to qubit of 2. Think of it as an array. You can, in simple terms, if you are aware of arrays and other things, you can think of it as an array of 2 qubits. Now we are applying the Hadamard gate on qubit 1. So you have seen that we applied Hadamard gate on qubit 1, and then we apply CNOT gate on qubit 1 using using the control bit 0. You can see this over here. And then after that, we are just printing that the entangled state is achieved. And finally, we are running the dump machine command. Okay, let's try and run this. Control enter. Once you see a number here, which means the code cell has perfectly compiled. And let's simulate this entanglement demo. Okay, so you can clearly see that we have an entangled state. So what is this 0 state here? So earlier in my presentation, I had defined 4 basis states, 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, and I told if you were to draw a state vector and represent them, you would name them as 0, 1, 2, 3. So right now, what we have is 0, 0, and 1, 1 in superposition, and they are entangled together, 2 qubits. So 0, 0 is nothing but the state vector form of 0, and 1, 1 is nothing but state vector form of 3. But while measuring, you can see that you have got the state vector 0 and state vector 2. It's not possible to exactly measure out these kind of qubits, but anyway, we have achieved quantum entanglement. Now, if you try and measure out the qubit 0, so right now they are in entanglement. If you try to measure out qubit 0, it will lose its superposition and the other qubit will not make any sense. So it will only make sense once they are entangled and they are measured separately. And finally, we are using the reset all command. So if you are using real quantum computers on Microsoft Azure Quantum, then if you're using those qubits and they're busy, then you're actually wasting a lot of energy. You're actually wasting a lot of information. We have to reset all the qubits once the work is complete. This was a small demonstration using Microsoft QSharp. So further coding into Microsoft QSharp will be done in the next session from Tesseract Coding. The registration link will be sent to you in the chat sometime. All right. So that's it for today's session, guys. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them. Thank you. You can also follow me on Twitter or on LinkedIn. If you have any questions or doubts, if you want to ask me personally, then my DMs are always open on Twitter. Any quantum related questions, QSharp related questions, or Qiskit related questions, you can just drop in my Twitter DMs. So I've shared the link for registration for the event in the chat section. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them. Okay, so I take it that you guys don't have any questions, which either means that you have not understood anything or you have understood everything perfectly. Yeah. Yes, someone had a question.
Sir, we see that we have sometimes a probability, just like products and probability. So can we have in a quantum computer any probability or uncertainty?
Okay. Could you please rephrase your question? Like, are you trying to say that in a quantum computer, will there be uncertainty if you try to measure the qubits?
Sir, we have uncertainty in physics. So anything quantum computer, is there any uncertainty or everything is clear due to the quantum entanglement?
No, everything is not due to quantum entanglement. It is due to the quantum laws only. And the laws that we have discussed in quantum computing involve a certain level of uncertainty. That is why I said the quantum states are probabilistic. Yeah. So, any more
Yes, sir,
clarifications?
that's my question. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Any more questions?
Okay, so like, guys, if you have any further questions, प्लीज आप लोग सवाल पूछें, ऐसा ना करें. Okay, well, so seeing no question, Farhan bhai, I have a request, if you can.
Yeah, sure.
Like, okay, I'm audible. Can you
Yes, you are.
please like share the resources with in the chat? Like, not now. You can obviously share later because the chat would be live.
Okay. Fine, surely.
Okay, so wait, just give me a second. Okay, so Farhan, like before, like it was a really great session by you. Thank you so much for a great session. Like, and we're looking forward to would attend the next session on quantum as well, because I'm really like I would really like started liking. We have a question. Okay, what hurdles do researchers face in developing a quantum computer?
Okay. Yeah. Awesome question. So think of a multi-qubit processor, quantum processor. But before that, let me go to the slide. So we know that quantum transistor has to work at superconducting temperatures, and achieving this low temperature 0.1 Kelvin and working with this temperature in labs is very difficult, especially if you're trying to communicate the qubit values. So the qubit values have to be seen on a screen, right? So you need to see the values somewhere, either in physical form or on a screen. And these screens currently work with classical computers. So the issues mainly faced is interfacing these quantum computers with classical computers, provided that the temperature of quantum computers is less than 0.1 Kelvin, and normal computers is normal room temperature. That's one of the main difficulties. Another difficulties which I also spoke about is creating the quantum fabric. So if you're trying to use couplers along with these SQUIT devices, the couplers have to be placed in such a way that the frequency of oscillations, so they have a lot of inductor circuits inside. So each coupler and each you can call it SQUIT device has uh, an inductor and a capacitor. In trying to achieve a magnetic field with an oscillation has to be really precise. So if even if the magnetic field which has been achieved varies by even 0.0001 unit, then your quantum computer will not work. So that's another difficulty, but people are trying to overcome that by programmable magnetic fields. And another issue is you can call it the quantum volume for that matter. It's not an issue, but quantum volume is what you measure from a quantum computer. How many qubits you can have working simultaneously in a processor, provided that there is a lot of noise. So what is this noise that we are talking about? Noise is nothing but the electrons being bombarding between each other once you are transferring the qubits from one place to another, or once you are transferring electrons from one place to another inside a quantum computer. So even at 0.1 Kelvin, we do not have perfect systems, and there will be few electrons. Again, there's a probability there will be few electrons moving haywire here and there, which damages the whole system. So these are the three difficulties I feel that researchers or people who are making quantum computers uh, go through it.
Okay, well, everyone, I have shared the feedback form link in the chat box. आप सब जो है ना वो पहले feedback form भर लें. Okay, guys, Farhan bhai, till then, just allow me to introduce you with my team.
Yeah,
Should
sure.
I?
Yeah, sure.
First, let me introduce you to my MSP team. Like I already told you that we have the second highest number of MSPs from a single institution in Pakistan.
Okay.
We have with us Miss Ariba. She is from my department. She is from Computer System Engineering department. And do we have Munza here? We had Munza. Okay, yeah. So like no one else is like they were here, but maybe they would be like light ka issue ho gaya ho kuch. Okay, so apart from MSP, I told you that this event is also in collaboration with IEEE CS Society. So, like, let me introduce you to my IEEE CS team, IEEE team. Well, first of all, comes the Iron Lady, I call her. She's Hira Abid Khan. Hira, are you there? Hello?
Yes, Mursal, I'm here. Assalamu
She's
alaikum.
our chair.
Yes.
She chairs our IEEE student branch, and also she is the DSC lead. She was the DSC lead, yeah. She was, na, Hira? Yeah, you're 10 years up.
No.
Okay, yeah, she is DS lead. See, Ricardo, you are applying to be a DS lead, and Hira is a DSC lead. Okay, so after Hira, we have, let me just scroll through this. Okay, we have Abdul Samad. He's General Secretary of IEEE CS. Not General Secretary, I'm very sorry. Abdul Samad is the Treasurer. Okay, Farhan, are you there or did you leave?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry. Okay, Abdul Samad is the treasurer of my society, IEEE CS. And we have Miss Maha Kamal. She is the general secretary of IEEE student branch. Hello Maha, how are you?
Hello, Mursal.
Okay, we also have Miss Maham Sabir. She chairs IEEE. I hope you know Women in Engineering.
Yes,
She is
yes.
also my class fellow. Okay, yeah, we have Munza back here. Yeah, Munza is from MSP Society. She is also an MSP.
हेलो
Hello,
Hey,
Munza.
हेलो सॉरी वो पावर ऑफ हो गया था तो मैं चली गई थी मीटिंग के बीच में से
Yeah, we can completely understand that. And we, in last but not the least, we have Saira here, Ms. Saira Bano. She is the Director General of IEEE Student Branch. Okay, guys, apart from that, we have a very, very, very majestic person with us in the meeting as well. उनसे कुछ देर पहले मैं ना कचहरी भी कर रहा था. But I hope so, Ricardo, you don't know Urdu. You can't understand Urdu. Yeah, we have Ricardo Prince from, he is also an beta level MSP from US. And hello, Ricardo, are you there or listening to us?
Yeah.
Okay, so like Ricardo would be, yeah, Ricardo is here.
wonderful to meet you
Guys.
all, guys. Wonderful to meet you all.
Yeah. It's nice, really nice to meet you. And we're looking forward to have you guys watching our next session with Tesseract on quantum computing. It will be very good. Inshallah.
Okay, Farhan and Ricardo, let me tell you that many of the today's attendees have applied for MSP. Not MSP
Okay.
like now it is like Microsoft Learn Student Ambassador. Yeah, many of them have applied for the same. So we are hoping from July we'd have the highest number of MSPs from a single institution in Pakistan, or probably from the world. Yeah, because.
Awesome.
Okay, so guys, we just have got 25 responses on feedback form. Let me tell you that whoever fills the feedback form will get the certificate. After I close the feedback form, no one will be allowed to fill up the certificate or fill up the form, or he or she will get the certificate. या फिर बाद में जो आप आते हैं कि मुझे सर्टिफिकेट नहीं मिला. So you have to fill up the feedback form. Sorry. जब आप लोग feedback form भर लेंगे, okay, we have 27. Good. The number is increasing. Well, Farhan bhai, thank you so much. Like you can speak Urdu na? Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, I can.
So like आपका कल पेपर भी है. You have an exam tomorrow, but still you are here with us. I can't imagine कि अगर मेरा कल पेपर होता तो मैं तो लैपटॉप को हाथ भी नहीं लगाता हूँ. Yeah. Unless उसके नोट्स लैपटॉप में ना हो.
Okay. Nice.
Um,
Yeah, I would also like to introduce Tesseract coding to you guys. Ricardo, would you like to go ahead and introduce Tesseract coding?
Yeah, Ricardo, please.
Yeah, sure, I can do that. So, Mursal Sayed, and I'm not sure if we have anyone else here from Tesseract, but Tesseract